Okay, this is Turning Point. This was your homework for the weekend, and I'm going to do a video lesson with you guys. The first thing we're going to do with our strategy is to preview. So let's go ahead and read the title. It's called Turning Point. Oops, sorry there. Wrong one. It's called Turning Point. And we do have one illustration that says, "Vote for women, convicts, lunatics, and women all have no votes." Well, I see the word vote and I see the word vote again. So this is probably going to have to do with voting. And I can make a connection with voting because I have voted before in many different types of elections. Now, the second strategy, the second part of our strategy, second step is to look for line 5 right here. British sisters. We know we have to go ahead and go back. Look for line 30. Scroll this up a little. And there is tipping point right there in line 30. Go back. Oh, 6. Line 6. Silent sentinels. Okay, now step number 3 is to read the selection all the way through. Okay, so how does the writer, Turning Point, how does the writer use language to bolster? And this word right here, bolster, take a minute, pause, and look up the word bolster and come back and we'll compare definitions. Okay, so bolster, in my own words, means to support. How does the writer use language to support the cause for a national memorial? So let's go ahead and I'll read this to you. Follow along as I read. By the second decade of the 20th century, the struggle for women's suffrage in the United States had been going on for nearly 70 years. Frustrated by the glacial pace of state-by-state efforts to win women the right to vote, two suffragettes, Alice Paul and Lucy Burns, had had enough. Influenced by their British sisters, they began to organize protest marches. Then, in 1917, they began to form groups known as Silent Sentinels. These activists quietly picketed outside the White House but were ignored at first. Eventually, they began to get arrested. They were charged with obstructing free passage of the sidewalk. More than 70 of these brave women were sent to Occoquan Workhouse in Lorton, Virginia. The conditions were harsh and unsanitary in that notorious prison. The women suffered abusive, inhumane treatment and subsisted on maggot-infested food. Those who refused the foul food were force-fed. Once news of this rough handling leaked out, telegrams flooded Washington. The suffrage movement had reached a turning point. President Woodrow Wilson bowed to public opinion and acted. He introduced the Susan B. Anthony Amendment, which was ratified as the 19th Constitutional Amendment on August 26, 1920, turning on an all-volunteer organization called Today, an all-volunteer organization called the Turning Point Suffragist Memorial Association is itself setting up shop outside the White House. Its goal is to raise sufficient funds to create a national memorial across the street from the Occoquan Workhouse, where the Occoquan Workhouse once stood. This memorial would honor the women who were held there and whose plight proved to be the tipping point for the long-sought goal of women's suffrage. It could honor the courage and sacrifices of the countless women who organized, marched, petitioned, lectured, and suffered to win a long-denied right that we now take for granted. Across our land stand statues, monuments, memorials honoring politicians, pilgrims, and poets. We acknowledge in stone and steel the contributions of nurses, firefighters, soldiers, and sled dogs. It's high time we recognize the efforts and achievements of the valiant suffragists. I applaud the idea of paying tribute to them with a national memorial. I urge you to support this worthy cause. Okay, so now, our fourth strategy is to stop and jot and to make notes. There are a couple of words that I want to look at with you. First of all, suffrage, women's suffrage. That just means the right to vote. And then there was this is also, I'm sorry, I'm just looking for one more word. As I'm looking, you keep looking. Subsisted right here means to survive off of. Obstructing means blocking. So as I'm doing this, when you're doing this on your own, I want you to be looking up these words and finding the definitions. Now, we need to come up with the main idea of this text. And the main idea of this text is a description of the women's suffrage movement and call to create a monument. Okay. Now we made our stop and jot notes. We have the main idea. We looked at some words. Oh, here's another word that I want to look at. It's in the poster. Convict, I'm sure many of you guys know, is someone in prison, convicted of a crime, and a lunatic is basically a crazy person. Now let's look at and if we go back here to the text, we can see that Alice, Paul, and Lucy Burns were influenced by their British sisters, and they began to organize protest march. Well, we also see that they had had enough. What had they had enough of? Right here, frustrated by the glacial, and that just means slow, because the glacier moves slowly, pace of the state-by-state efforts to win women the right. So we have tipping point highlighted right here. This memorial would honor the women who were held there and whose plight proved to be the tipping point for the long-sought goal of women's suffrage. So this who were held there is talking about the workhouse, the prison. So after they were held there, their plight, or their, another word for plight, go ahead and pause this and look it up, and then come back and you can see what another word for plight is. So their fight proved to be the tipping point. And tipping point, if you have a scale or a slide and you have 10 pounds here and you put 15 pounds, well, you know that this is what your scale is going to look like. 15 pounds here and 10 pounds there. It gets tipped over. So question, so let's go on. Second page. Ooh, sorry there. I keep forgetting. I'm going to get better with this app, I promise. Okay, so the first question is, let me go ahead and fix that for you. Thank you. is, what does the author mean by referring to their British sisters, line 5? So let's go ahead and go back. Remember that. Now, the second question says, what prompted Alice Paul and Lucy Burns to take action? So we're going to have to look out for Alice Paul and Lucy Burns. Third question, explain what the writer means by tipping point on line 30. So next question is, why were the arrested protesters known as the Silent Sentinels? Remember the line. Okay. Question 5. Give 3 examples of the writer's use of highly charged words to persuade readers of the importance of honoring the Silent Sisters. Now, highly charged words, let me do this in black, is just strong, persuasive language. Okay? And then question number 6 is, explain the meaning of the poster. Ooh, let me erase that. Sorry, guys. I will get better with this app. Meaning of the poster. Comment on its tone and intention. The first question. What does the author mean by referring to their British sisters in line 5? A. Religious women who live and serve in Britain. B. Female members of the Paul and Burns family. C. Like-minded activists protesting in Britain. D. None of the above. Now, I'm going to talk this through while you flip over and look at the text. But take a few seconds and tell me about tell me if you believe whether or not there is any mention of religion at all in this text, and if you can provide text evidence. So pause this and look for anything having to do with religion in the text. No, there is nothing having to do with religion. As you can see, I crossed that out. Now stop and let's look. Sisters are members of families. So look and see if you find any evidence supporting any type of familial or family connection between all of these ladies. Go ahead and pause and check it out and look for some text evidence. As you can see, I did not find any evidence of familial or family connections. Now, like-minded activists protesting in Britain. An activist. I want you to pause this and look up the word activist. Okay, so an activist is somebody who supports a cause. So go ahead and write that definition down. Now, let's think about this. We have 2 choices. D, none of the above, or C, like-minded. So a like-minded, they have the same thoughts. Activists protesting in Britain. Well, we know that there were protesters in the United States because they wanted to have the right to vote. So if we infer from the text, we can know that in Britain, they must have also protested for the same right to vote. So now C is the answer. So we can say, how did you determine your response? In the first paragraph, the author states Miss Paul and Miss Burns are influenced by British activists. Okay, so then what prompted Alice Paul and Lucy Burns to take action? So we can say in the text, it states Alice and Lucy were frustrated by the slow pace of the women's suffrage. Let me spell that properly. Start over. Suffrage. Remember, that just means right to vote movement. Okay. One more, and you guys will come up with the last three by yourself. Explain what the writer means by tipping point. Point is like the change in the tide or the change in the direction of the movement. So the author means the tipping point is a change in the direction of the movement. Okay, now, as you see, you have questions 4, 5, and 6. Finish those 3 on your own. Make sure that you write complete sentences and provide text evidence. Thank you.